Welcome to Better Everyday, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of self-improvement, one book at a time. I'm Tom, your host, and along with my co-host Kelly, we'll be breaking down the key ideas from top self-improvement books and turning those insights into actionable steps you can apply to your life. Together, we're passionate about helping you grow and become your best self. Before we dive into today's episode, a quick reminder. If you're enjoying the show, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep bringing you more book deep dives every week. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. All right, let's get started. We hope you enjoy this episode and that it helps you become better every day.
Welcome in, everyone. Ready to dive deep. Today we're tackling deep work. And you sent in this excerpt from Cal Newport's book, DeepWork, Rules for Focused Success in a Distracted World.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating look at, how we can actually get things done in this, crazy world of distractions we live in.
Exactly. It seems like everywhere you turn, there's another notification, another email, another something vying for our attention.
It's true. And Newport really gets at that tension, that pull between what he calls deep work and then, all the shallow work that tends to fill our days.
Okay, so before we get too far, let's make sure everyone's on the same page. What exactly are those terms? What's deep work, according to Newport?
He's really precise about it. He defines deep work as really focusing without distraction on those activities that, that push your cognitive abilities.
So it's not just like going through the motions. It's the stuff that really requires you to think, to stretch your mental muscles.
Right. And crucially, it's the work that creates new value, that hones your skills, the kind of work that's, honestly, it's hard for others to just come in and replicate.
Okay, so that's deep work. What about the flip side, the shallow work?
So shallow work, think of it as those tasks that, they don't really demand that intense mental effort. Things like answering emails, those routine meetings we all have, or let's face it, getting lost in social media.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one these days.
Huge. And, it can feel productive in the moment, but you're not really creating anything new. You're not really pushing your skills forward.
And I think that's what Newport's getting at, right? He's arguing that while we're drawn to that shallow work, it's that deep work that actually drives success, especially as technology keeps evolving.
Exactly. And he makes a really interesting connection between, the rise of all these intelligent machines we have now and the growing importance of deep work.
Okay, so explain that connection. How do those two things relate?
Well, as machines, AI and automation, as they take over more of those routine tasks, the skills that are really valuable, the ones that require that deep thinking, the creativity, problem solving, those become even more important, not less.
So in a way, these machines, they're making deep work more essential, not obsolete.
That's exactly it. And, he goes on to say that there are really two core abilities that are essential for anyone who wants to thrive in this new economy we're all living in.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What are these two superpowers?
First, you have to be able to master hard things quickly. And second, you need to be able to produce at an elite level, both in terms of the quality of your work and the speed at which you deliver it.
So not just keeping up, but really excelling, becoming a top performer.
Yeah, and he uses a really interesting example in the book, a young guy named Jason Ben, to illustrate this.
Okay, tell me about Jason.
So Jason was a consultant, and he realized that, his job, a lot of it was Excel-based, was becoming increasingly automatable. A machine could do it.
Oh, so he saw the writing on the wall, so to speak, and what did he do?
He decided to learn to code, but not just dabble in it. He went all in on deep work, like seriously committed to it.
Wow, so not just like taking a few online courses, this was hardcore.
Totally. He locked himself in a room, no distractions, just textbooks, note cards, a highlighter, really forcing himself to concentrate.
So he was going beyond just learning the material, he was training his mind to focus.
Yeah, and it worked. By embracing that deep work, Ben was able to transform his skill set, and he became this highly sought-after programmer in a field that, it's much harder to automate away.
It's a powerful example of how deep work can help you adapt to the changing demands of the job market.
It really is. And that ability to, learn those hard things quickly, it's especially crucial in what Newport calls winner-take-all markets.
Okay, winner-take-all markets. Explain that one.
So these are fields where the rewards are really concentrated at the top, like, think of professional athletes or best-selling authors, the top software developers.
So it's not enough to be good. You have to be exceptional to really stand out.
All right. And deep work, it helps you get there by allowing you to develop your skills to a level that, well, that sets you apart from the competition.
But it's not just about grinding away for hours on end, right? Newport talks about the science of learning, too.
He does. He cites the work of Anders Ericsson. He's a psychologist who's done, tons of research on deliberate practice. And Ericsson, he emphasizes that it's not just about putting in the hours. It's about practicing with real focus, with intention.
That makes sense. I mean, mindlessly repeating the same task isn't going to get you to the top of your field.
No, you have to be deliberate. You have to be constantly pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone, actively seeking ways to improve your performance.
And this deliberate practice, when you combine it with that focused concentration, it actually leads to physical changes in your brain.
Yeah, Newport talks about this concept of myelin. It's this fatty substance that, well, it insulates nerve fibers in the brain.
Okay, brain science, always fascinating. So how does myelin relate to deep work?
Think of it like insulation on an electrical wire. Myelin helps signals travel faster, more efficiently. So when you're engaged in focused practice, you're essentially strengthening the myelin sheath around those relevant neural pathways, making those connections stronger faster.
So it's like deep work isn't just a productivity hack, it's actually rewiring your brain for success.
Exactly. And the more you do it, the better you become at concentrating, at focusing, at learning new things.
It's like building a muscle, but for your brain.
Perfect analogy. And speaking of building things, Newport doesn't stop at just learning hard things. He also emphasizes the importance of producing at that elite level we talked about.
Okay, so not just mastering the skills, but actually using them to create high-quality work.
Right, and he illustrates this through the example of Adam Grant. He's Wharton's youngest tenured professor.
Adam Grant, I know his work, super productive guy. What's his secret?
Well, one of his secrets is a technique he calls batching.
Batching. Okay, that's a new one. Tell me more.
It's basically consolidating similar tasks into these uninterrupted blocks of time. So Grant might spend, several days focused solely on research, ignoring emails and all those other distractions, just to maximize his focus and output.
So it's about working smarter, not just longer.
Exactly. And Newport contrasts this with what he calls the busyness as a proxy for productivity trap.
That sounds familiar. I think we've all been there.
Oh, yeah. It's this tendency to prioritize visible activity over actually creating value.
It's like checking email constantly, attending back-to-back meetings, but not actually producing anything truly meaningful.
It's like running on a treadmill. You expend all this energy, but you're not really going anywhere.
So how do we escape that trap? How do we shift from busyness to real productivity?
That's where deep work comes in. By deliberately carving out time for focused, uninterrupted work, you can dramatically increase your output and create work that actually matters.
Okay, so deep work, it's clearly valuable. It helps us learn hard things. It helps us produce at an elite level, and it helps us stay ahead of the curve in this, in this world of increasing automation. But if it's so beneficial, why is it so rare? Why aren't we all doing this already?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's something Newport really dives into. And one reason, he says, is the rise of open office plans.
Open offices, those were supposed to foster collaboration, but I've always found them to be pretty distracting.
Yeah, they can be. And he mentions companies like Facebook and Square. They're famous for their open offices.
Right. And while there might be some benefits, I can see how that constant noise and interruption would make it really tough to focus deeply.
It's like trying to write a symphony in the middle of a rock concert. You might get some notes down, but it's not going to be your best work.
Great analogy. And what about, the way we measure productivity? Does that play a role?
Absolutely. And another reason deep work is so rare is that in many knowledge work jobs, there just aren't clear metrics for measuring output.
So if you can't easily quantify the value of your work, it's tempting to fall back on that old industrial era metric of just being busy.
Right. So you end up prioritizing the tasks that make you look busy. Even if they're not truly important, it becomes about appearances over substance.
It seems like we're up against some pretty powerful forces here. Our work environments, the way we measure productivity, even our own brains are kind of wired for distraction.
It's true. But don't worry, Newport doesn't leave us hanging. He offers a whole range of strategies and techniques for cultivating a deep work habit, even when you're facing those challenges.
And that's what we'll dive into next.
So how do we actually cultivate a deep work habit? In a world that, it often feels like it's designed to distract us.
That's the big question, right? We can talk about the benefits all day, but how do we actually make it happen?
And that's really the heart of Newport's book. He argues that it's not just about trying harder or relying on willpower. It's about being more strategic.
Okay, so we need a plan, a framework for making deep work a reality, not just a good intention.
Exactly. He calls it a depth philosophy, basically a set of principles and strategies that you consciously adopt to integrate deep work into your life.
A depth philosophy, I like that. It sounds almost, well, philosophical.
It is. In a way, it's about being intentional, about making deep work a core part of how you work, how you think.
So what are some of these depth philosophies? Give us the rundown.
He outlines 4 main approaches:
Hmm.
monastic, bimodal, rhythmic, and journalistic.
Okay, 4 different paths to deep work. Let's break those down, starting with monastic. What's that all about?
The monastic philosophy, it's, well, as the name suggests, it's about eliminating or drastically reducing those shallow obligations.
So you can create those large stretches of uninterrupted time for deep work.
Exactly. It's about, minimizing those distractions, creating a space where you can really focus.
Sounds almost like going off the grid.
In a way, yeah, he gives the example of Donald Knuth. He's this renowned computer scientist, and he famously avoids email and most other shallow communication so he can really focus on his writing and research.
Wow, that's pretty extreme. Not sure I could go that far.
It's definitely not for everyone, and that's why he offers other philosophies, like the bimodal approach.
Okay, bimodal, what's that one about?
Bimodal is about alternating between, extended periods of deep work and then periods dedicated to other activities.
So it's like you go all in on deep work for a while, and then you come up for air and deal with the rest of life.
Exactly. Newport uses the example of Carl Jung, the psychologist, who would spend weeks or even months in his isolated tower, completely immersed in his writing and research, but then he'd return to his clinical practice and social life in Zurich.
Interesting. So it's like switching between 2 distinct modes of working.
Right. You have your deep work mode and then your everything else mode.
And then there's the rhythmic philosophy, which sounds a bit more, well, a bit more manageable for most people.
Yeah, rhythmic is all about establishing a regular, predictable time for deep work each day.
So it's about building a habit, a routine around deep work.
Exactly. Newport himself follows this philosophy. He carves out a specific time each morning for focused writing before the distractions of the day take over.
Makes sense. Get it done before the emails start pouring in.
Right. And then finally, you have the journalistic philosophy.
Okay, journalistic. That one sounds intriguing.
This one's for people who thrive on a bit more flexibility. It's about fitting in deep work whenever you can find the time, even if it's just in small chunks.
Like a journalist on a deadline, grabbing moments to write whenever they're available.
Precisely. And I think the key takeaway here is that there's no one right philosophy. It's about finding the approach that best fits you, your personality, your work style, your circumstances.
So it's about being self-aware, choosing a path that you can actually stick with that's sustainable for you.
Exactly. And once you've chosen your philosophy, Newport emphasizes the importance of ritualizing your deep work practice.
Ritualizing. Okay, now you're really getting into the philosophical stuff. Should I be lighting incense and chanting?
No, nothing like that. It's about creating, a consistent set of habits and routines that signal to your brain that there's time to shift into deep work mode.
So it could be something as simple as like brewing a particular kind of tea, or putting on your noise-canceling headphones, or going to a specific spot in your house or office.
Exactly. It's about creating a mental trigger that helps you get into that right headspace.
Like a pregame ritual for your brain.
I like that. And speaking of getting into the right headspace, Newport also suggests something he calls the grand gesture.
Okay, grand gesture. That sounds, whoa, grand. What are we talking about here?
It's about using a radical change to your environment, maybe coupled with a significant investment of effort or money, to really boost your motivation.
So like going all out, making a big statement that this deep work is important.
Exactly. He gives the example of Bill Gates's famous Think Weeks, where he would retreat to this secluded cabin with stacks of books and papers just to focus intensely on big picture thinking for Microsoft.
Wow, that's definitely a grand gesture. Any other examples?
He also mentions J.K. Rowling. She famously checked into a luxury hotel suite to finish writing the final Harry Potter book.
That's one way to avoid writer's block.
Right. She found that, that change in environment, that investment she made, it helped her focus and overcome distractions.
So it's about creating an experience that makes you feel like you're embarking on a special mission, something really important.
Exactly. And while we might not all be able to, rent out a luxury suite or disappear to a cabin in the woods, we can still find ways to create that sense of ritual and significance around our deep work.
I love that. But even with rituals and grand gestures, I think a lot of us struggle with, with the mental aspect of deep work, actually staying focused, resisting those distractions?
Oh, absolutely. It's not easy. And Newport emphasizes the importance of training your mind for deep work, just like an athlete trains for a marathon.
So we need to build up our mental endurance, our ability to concentrate for extended periods.
Right. He shares this story about Adam Marlin. He's a businessman who studies the Talmud every morning. And Marlin found that, that practice has actually significantly improved his cognitive abilities, his capacity for deep work.
Interesting. So it suggests that even activities that aren't directly related to our work can help strengthen our focus.
Exactly. It's about building those mental muscles.
Hmm.
And Newport suggests several specific techniques for training your mind, including something called productive meditation.
Productive meditation. So not just like clearing your mind like in traditional meditation.
Right. It's more about focusing your attention on a single, well-defined professional problem, and then resisting that urge to let your mind wander.
So it's like directed thinking, focusing your mental energy on a specific goal.
Precisely. And he also mentions memory training, which might seem a little surprising.
Memory training, like memorizing a deck of cards.
Yeah, exactly. He highlights a technique developed by memory champion Ron White, and it involves creating these vivid mental images and associating them with specific cards.
Okay, so how does that relate to deep work? It sounds a bit like, well, like a party trick.
It's more than a party trick. The process of creating those mental images and practicing their recall, it actually strengthens your working memory, your ability to hold complex information in mind.
Which is essential for any kind of deep work, whether you're writing code, analyzing data, or crafting a marketing strategy.
Exactly. So even though it might seem unrelated, memory training can be a powerful tool for improving your concentration and focus.
I'm starting to see the connections here, but I have to admit, I still feel a little intimidated by the idea of deep work. It's easy to get caught up in the busyness of the day and feel like I just don't have time for these extended periods of focus.
I get it. It's a challenge, but I think it's important to remember that Newport's approach to deep work isn't about, becoming a Luddite or rejecting technology altogether.
Right. It's not about going off the grid completely or throwing away our smartphones.
No, it's about using technology deliberately, intentionally, rather than letting it control us.
So it's a technology recalibration, not a technology detox.
I like that. And he talks about moving from what he calls the any benefit approach to internet use, where any perceived benefit, no matter how small, justifies spending time online, to a more intentional craftsman approach.
Okay, craftsman approach. That sounds interesting. What does that look like in practice?
The craftsman approach, it's about, carefully considering the impact of each tool on your most important goals. You only adopt those tools, those technologies, that provide a significant and demonstrable benefit.
So it's about being more selective, more discerning about how we use technology, not just mindlessly consuming everything that comes our way.
Right. And he even suggests running an experiment, quitting social media for 30 days, just to reevaluate its true value in your life.
I could see how that would be a powerful way to break free from that constant pull of social media and see how it really affects your focus and productivity.
Exactly. And even if you decide that, social media does have a place in your life, Newport emphasizes the importance of scheduling your internet use.
So creating intentional blocks of time for checking email or browsing social media instead of just, constantly giving in to every notification.
Exactly. It's about being proactive, not reactive, taking control of your technology use instead of letting it control you.
This is all great stuff, and I appreciate that it's not about rejecting technology entirely. It's about using it more mindfully. But what about all that shallow work that inevitably creeps into our days, even with the best intentions? It can be hard to avoid completely.
That's true. And Newport acknowledges that, we can't eliminate shallow work entirely.
So it's not about striving for some unattainable ideal of perfect deep work all the time?
No, it's about recognizing that shallow work exists, but we can manage it, minimize its impact.
So what are some practical strategies for taming the shallow work beast?
One of his suggestions, and it's a bit radical, is to schedule every minute of your day.
Every minute? Wow, that sounds, a little intense.
It might sound extreme, but the idea is to become more intentional about how you're spending your time. It helps you identify those pockets of shallow work that can be eliminated or consolidated.
So it's not about becoming a slave to your schedule. It's about gaining a clearer understanding of where your time is going and making more conscious choices about how you spend it.
Exactly. And he also suggests quantifying the depth of each activity.
Quantifying the depth, how do you do that?
He recommends assigning a depth score to each task based on, how long it would take to train a bright recent college graduate to take your place.
That's an interesting way to think about it. It forces you to evaluate the true value of your work.
Right. And finally, Newport offers some specific strategies for managing one of the biggest sources of shallow work: email.
Email, the black hole of productivity.
He suggests a few interesting techniques. One is the sender filter, where you only respond to emails from people who meet certain criteria.
It's like creating a VIP list for your inbox.
Exactly. It could be clients, colleagues on specific projects, or people you've explicitly given permission to contact you. It's about setting boundaries and being more selective about which emails you engage with.
And what about those emails you do respond to? Any tips for making those interactions more efficient?
He suggests writing process-centric email responses, which basically means clearly defining the next steps and minimizing the potential for back-and-forth communication.
So being clear and concise, getting to the point.
Exactly. And perhaps his most controversial tip, he says, don't respond to every email.
Wait, what? Don't respond to every email? That sounds almost, a little rude.
I know it goes against the grain for a lot of people, but Newport argues that, it's often okay to let some emails go unanswered, especially those that are non-essential.
So it's about recognizing that your time and attention are valuable and that you have the right to choose how you spend them.
Precisely. It's about being more mindful about your communication and prioritizing the interactions that truly matter.
This whole conversation has been incredibly eye-opening. I'm starting to see how deeply ingrained the cult of busyness is in our culture.
It's everywhere,
Yeah.
and it's easy to get caught up in it.
And I love how Newport offers these practical strategies for pushing back against that, for reclaiming our time and attention, for rediscovering the power of deep work. But I do wonder, is there a downside to all this? Could we become so focused on individual achievement that we lose sight of collaboration and connection?
That's a great question, and it's something to be mindful of. But I think Newport would argue that, deep work isn't about isolation. It's about creating the space and the mental clarity to do your best work, which ultimately benefits both you and the people you collaborate with.
That makes sense. It's not about becoming a hermit. It's about finding the right balance, the right rhythm for your work style and your goals.
Exactly. And I think even in his most monastic approach, there's still room for interaction and collaboration. It's just about being more deliberate about when and how those interactions happen.
I'm definitely going to be experimenting with some of these ideas, seeing how they can help me improve my own focus and productivity.
I think you'll be surprised by the results. Even small changes, like incorporating a shutdown ritual or practicing productive meditation, can make a big difference.
This has been a fascinating deep dive into deep work, but before we wrap up, I'm curious to hear how Newport brings it all together. What's his concluding message?
He ends with a compelling story about Bill Gates and the founding of Microsoft.
Oh, tell us about that.
So, it's the classic story, young Bill Gates. He sees the Altair, one of the first, real personal computers, on the cover of Popular Electronics magazine.
Oh, yeah, I've heard the story. It's kind of legendary in the tech world.
And Gates, he instantly sees this huge opportunity. It's back when most people didn't even know what a PC was.
Right. It was like the Wild West of computing. Everything was new and uncharted.
Exactly. And so Gates, drops out of Harvard. And with his friend Paul Allen, they spend, get this, 8 weeks just intensely focused on developing a basic programming language for the Altair.
8 weeks. That's incredible. I mean, to create something so groundbreaking in such a short amount of time.
It is. And, we often hear this story told to highlight Gates's vision, his ambition.
Yeah.
But Newport points out that it also showcases his ability to work deeply, seriously deeply.
He was able to shut out all those distractions, concentrate for hours on end, and produce something truly innovative in record time.
Exactly. And that's really the point Newport drives home. Deep work isn't just about getting things done. It's about doing work that matters, work that pushes boundaries, work that creates real value.
It's about reaching your full potential, creating a legacy that goes beyond those everyday distractions.
Right. And in a world that's increasingly fragmented, where our attention is constantly being pulled in 1,000 different directions, that ability to work deeply, it's more valuable than ever.
It's a skill that sets you apart. It makes you indispensable. It allows you to thrive in a world that's, let's face it, it's becoming increasingly complex and demanding.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Newport's book, it gives us a compelling argument for why deep work matters, But ultimately, it's up to each of us to decide how we'll implement these ideas in our own lives.
He's given us the tools, the strategies, the frameworks. Now it's time to put them into practice, to step back from those shallow distractions and rediscover the power and the satisfaction of deep work.
To think deeply, to create deeply, to connect deeply with the work that truly matters to us.
And in doing so, to tap into a level of productivity, fulfillment, and meaning that's, while it's increasingly rare in our always-on world.
It's a challenge, no doubt about it, but it's a challenge worth taking on.
I love that. So to wrap things up, I want to leave our listeners with a question, or actually a few questions to ponder.
Go for it.
What would it look like for you to embrace deep work? What could you achieve if you consistently dedicated focused time to your most important work? What remarkable things could you create? What impact could you have on the world?
Those are the questions that, well, those are the questions that really get to the heart of it.
And that's it for our deep dive into deep work. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and most importantly, stay deep.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Better Every Day. We hope you found some actionable insights to help you on your self-improvement journey. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated on future deep dives. And if you're on YouTube, hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, small steps every day lead to big changes. See you next time.